The Youth Media Workshop is a program that's been going on for 5 years, and we teach African American youth in our public schools how to make TV and radio programs. We work with them once a week during the school year, after school, and they they interview older African Americans in the community, generally, to learn about what things were like back then, and to capture these stories before these people died. And they turn them into programs. They've looked at desegregation, they've looked at the history of the drum corps in town, they've looked at hip-hop. They learn all the technical skills that's required to do that: interviewing, editing, videotaping, working in the studio. And it's been real fun to work with them. And then this last year, we've been training teachers to teach this to the students. And we meet with the teachers once a month to support them and to see what they need from us to execute this program. The workshop really is the brainchild of Dr. William Patterson.
Okay.
He knew how important media is to young people. In fact, young people consume about 4 hours in general, about 4 hours of media a day, and African American youth consume about twice as much media as that.
Yeah, we talked about that in class a little bit.
Yeah. So he knew that if you want to reach young people, you need to use media as the hook. And furthermore, the stereotypes that are perpetuated about youth, all youth, and then African American youth in general, is really harmful to youth self-image, but it's also harmful to the adults who think they know youth through media only.
Yeah.
And so the idea was, if you want to empower youth to both feel better about themselves and create images that are more accurate, then train them in media. Well, it's an hour and a half a week, and it starts about 3 or 4 weeks into school and lasts through the end of the school year.
Wow,
so
that's pretty prolonged.
Yeah, it is. This project, which is an after-school project, links them back to school because they're using the lab computers there. And what we find that potentially at-risk students, if their attendance increases, their grades generally increase. And why would they want to go to school? Because something about school engages them. So the Youth Media Project is one way to engage them. First 3 years, they went, as a group we went once. We got oriented, they looked things up, they found documents, and then they would go back on their own individually, sometimes because of the research for this project, but other times they just went out of personal curiosity. The archivist would tell me, I saw so-and-so at the library, and they'd look up their family members' court records and things like that. We trained 6 teachers over the summer, and we funded 2 of them to do this during the school year. So the other 4 that didn't get selected, they still were impacted by the way we talked about engaging students with media, and they're actually using some of those techniques in their classroom. So our influence is spreading in the school district now that we are working directly with teachers in more than one teacher, and we're at talks with administrators and school board members. And what we have found is actually the technical skills, which they all learn, which is why they want to become part of this, because it's media. And when we interview them after the project, the thing that amazed me, though, is it's the relationships that mean more to them than the technology. The relationships they build with their peers, the positive relationships, because often their peers box them, put them in a box and say, well, if you're interested in drama, that must mean you're white, because we're dealing with African American kids. If you're interested in the newspaper. And so there's a lot of negative peer pressure. So the Youth Media Workshop creates positive peer-to-peer relationships, which are really important to them. Not all black kids know each other. Some people think they do and they don't. And so they come together and they develop friendships. The adults, the teachers, the media professionals that work with the kids, they have very few adult role models outside of their families and outside the rigid structure of teacher-student. This program is much more like a mentoring program, so then they learn, they build relationships with adults that are positive, and the adults have then real experiences with youth, not just stereotyped experiences. And finally, the project links them to members in the community, older members who have achieved something, And so the kids, the young people, through that relationship that develops because they're creating a media product, they then see their position in the community differently. And one example of that is they present their findings at school board meetings. And they had directly contributed to getting a $5,000 grant for the youth media workshop from the school district at a time when they were millions of dollars in debt. There's such a focus on technology. Kids have to know how to use computers and math, and I agree with all that. However, relationships are what provide opportunities. They're what they become our guides. They can either be positive or negative influences in our life. And if through positive relationships we open the doors to all these other skills that are important, technology, critical thinking, the ability to interview, but their self-esteem improves and their confidence and the way they see themselves changes. It becomes a much broader, their perspective becomes much larger. We used to track grades, we used to track attendance. It's really hard to get the teachers to do that. I mean, they're just so overwhelmed. So when we were teaching it, we were able to get it more. So now what we have is we have more, just when we interview the kids afterwards, the information that I'm presenting to you is coming right from their mouths. Oh my God, there's so many things. I have a real big appreciation for teachers after working with these wonderful children who have some of them have lots of issues. Pretty much 80 or 90% of the youth we deal with have someone incarcerated in their family. So these kids don't necessarily come to us with shelter. They don't have regular meals. They don't have transportation. Another thing is some of the peer pressure they got. It's cool to have this shirt and for them to walk around the school and be in this project, but some of their peers would criticize them for being involved with what they thought was, acting white because they were doing this. And so that negative peer pressure, we dealt with that a lot. And that's one of the things, again, by working with the youth, we're creating positive peer-to-peer youth within the project, sort of as a way to encourage them when they are dealing with some negative peer pressure. A couple of things happened, like when we took one of the students to hear Melba Beals, who's one of the original Little Rock Nine. She had written a book called Warriors Don't Cry, and she came and took a few students. One student went up and we bought her the book, and the author autographed it. She was so inspired that she formed a group called Books Before Boys. It was a club at school, and the school bought there was like 7 girls in the club. They bought the books, and then they would meet over lunch in this one teacher's classroom who worked with youth media. And isn't that cool? I mean, that's a direct spin-off that this student was empowered to do this. And then the club lasted, several weeks or months at school, and then some of the kids who were in the original club a few years later started it up again, and they had it at their house. Oh. So, I mean, the kinds of things that this inspires, we don't know what they all are going to be, but when we hear things like this, we realize that the impact is greater than we know and deeper than we know.